first on our public agenda this evening, we have our tax classification hearing. Is there a motion to open the hearing?
Yes, I move that the Board of Selectmen open the annual tax classification hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Further discussion on opening the hearing? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. I will read the notice that was in the newspaper, Town of Rockport, tax classification hearing, Tuesday, October 17th, 2017, 7:05 p.m., Conference Room A, Rockport Town Hall, discussion of unified or multiple property tax classifications. Signed Sarah J. Wilkinson, Chair, Board of Selectmen, and it was posted in the Gloucester Times on October 11th, 2017. I can't believe it's already October. Good evening, Mitch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our Principal Assessor Diane Lashua is here.
Do you want to join us?
Diane, if you wanted to maybe give up there and give just a summary and for questions.
Good evening, Diane. Thanks for coming. Nice to see you.
Nice to see all you too. This is a standard question. It's whether or not to split the tax rate and have the residential rate would be reduced and the commercial, industrial, and personal property rate would be increased. I've included in your packet a little impact showing what would happen if we split the rate. Because we have such a small percentage of commercial and industrial property, they would take a really big hit, and the residential would, have a small decrease in theirs. So you can look at the.
Yeah, and just to note, this is a question that I actually get
Sure.
asked fairly often. Is only 5% of our is commercial.
Is considered commercial,
Considered
correct.
commercial,
It has
so-
to be coded as commercial. There are some that are mixed-use properties, and they might have a commercial component to them, but they're not a totally commercial property, so they go into that, but obviously only a portion of them. Like some of the shops on Bearskin Neck are a 50-50 split, so only part of them is considered commercial.
Right. Are there questions for Diane from the board? And then I'll open it up to the public.
Yeah, I had a question.
Sure.
I noticed in the categorization, there's residential, which is obviously the biggest category.
Correct.
But then there was one called personal property.
Correct.
What's the difference?
Personal property is a tax on the contents of businesses and second
Okay,
homes. It's a
okay.
separate tax entirely.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any further questions from board members? Okay. Any comments or questions from the public? Toby?
There's a
This one?
Sure.
How appropriate, the first one.
So this is our first time with the mic, so we'll see how it goes. and
do
then
I
we'll-
pick
we
it
can
up?
Yep, it's all ready, just put it, good.
Yeah, you can.
Perfect.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. We're always doing the same thing, and indeed, it's appropriate. It would be a hardship to the commercial interests, as Diane Lashua has explained. On the other hand, the commercial interests profit greatly from all of the services that the town provides for the tourists, which we, the householders, do not benefit from. Just for one instance, all of the trash that's picked up along the main street, at least in theory, none of that is household trash. So presumably a very small proportion of it is the residents' trash, and it's the trash largely of visitors. So I would be concerned that the assessments for the commercial properties would be sufficiently high that they would be paying their fair share of such additional services that they profit from and ordinary householders don't. Would that be the case?
as far as the assessments of the
Yes.
properties, the assessment of the property really doesn't have anything to do with the town services. It has to do with sales of like properties in town. So as far as, whether they, commercial gets any benefit from it, it's all done just strictly by numbers as to comparative properties. So commercial properties are only weighed in with commercial properties in
see.
sales.
I see that. I guess that makes sense, and maybe this isn't quite the place to address it. but 90% of the cost of the transfer station is borne by the residents, 10% by the town, the tax rate, and a large portion of what is carted from up and down Main Street would be produced by the tourists, the visitors, and there ought to be some way for the town, that is all of us, to recoup something on those expenses. I had another concern, which isn't directly for the tax rate, but it's the one time we get to see the assessors. May I go forward?
Diane, do you mind?
No, I don't mind.
Yes. The woodlots, are assessed, as unbuildable at 1/10 the cost of ordinary lots. And I believe it was 2 years ago the state changed their regulations, and the first, acre or something is assessed at one rate, and all of the rest
And the rest is
at,
backland.
at a much lesser rate.
Correct.
The cost on those went up for the owners considerably, but it's still an enormous rake-off. And you don't want to force the people who own the woodlots to sell them. It's a benefit for the town as a whole that there's a lot of area that's greenery. On the other hand, it's hardly fair. You go to the Board of Appeals and having paid, a subsidized rate 1/10 for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, and a ruling of the Board of Appeals, and hey presto, you've as good as won the lottery, and your unbuildable lot is suddenly buildable, and you've benefited from a tax shelter at the expense of all of us who own lots that are buildable or lots that have houses on them. And obviously the assessors can't do anything about this, but it needs to be changed. It could only be done by the state. And would the board consider writing a letter to the state asking for some consideration so that those who benefit from the tax shelters, when they come to cash in, are forced to pay up? It would only be fair.
Okay.
The woodlots are usually considered unbuildable lots because they're either landlocked or there's no frontage or no access to roads, and therefore that's why they are taxed at a 10% value of a regular house lot. What Toby's talking about is that occasionally there are lots that are considered unbuildable, and then, for instance, now the sewer goes by, so they're now considered a buildable lot, and they sell as a buildable lot, and they've been taxed as an unbuildable lot. So it's, I understand what Toby's saying, but it's usually a condition of each lot and the condition around it, is there frontage, is the sewer, because a lot of them are unbuildable because they didn't perk, and once the sewer goes up towards them or whatever, then they have more chance to be a buildable lot. So.
I don't think tax shelter is the right.
I don't think it's a tax shelter, no, it's just a,
Yeah.
it is a,
Yeah.
it's a state code that has to fit different parameters, and the parameters are if it doesn't perk, if it doesn't have frontage, and so on and so forth, we code them as unbuildable. We also have potentially developable if it's on a path or something that may be developed into a road. I think at one time, Jordan's Lane Extension was considered just a path, and then when they actually put a road in, all of those lots became developable when they were undevelopable before. So,
I know Denise had a comment, and then we should just make sure not to get too far off the topic.
you're right,
of
yeah.
tax
Yeah, this is classification, yeah.
Denise, go ahead.
Sorry,
No, no, it's fine.
just one comment. So, an example of that, Diana, would be on Johnson's Road, where I don't know how those lots were classified, but I assume they were classified as woodlots. And now,
Well, there isn't actually a classification for woodlots. It's a state code that's either a single-family or a two-family or whatever, or in this case, if it has a code of 1320, that means it's an unbuildable lot, which most of them up there were,
Yeah.
yes.
and now the planning board has issued a determination letter stipulating that it now determines that it is buildable.
Yes, and unfortunately, I don't get that information right away, so I don't know that until I'm sent a letter and I'm told to reclassify it. So
I see.
I'm not involved in what the Board of Appeals
Okay.
does, so I don't know why. I
Interesting.
honestly don't know why they, I'm assuming because of Johnson Road, they must be planning to develop the road or in some way, or got an easement across somebody's property. I don't know yet, so I don't have that information.
Okay, Don, did you have a question?
Yeah, real quick, do we have any idea how many properties historically have been affected by that?
Tell you the truth, I don't know. there are a lot of unbuildable lots in town, but most of them are truly landlocked and you'll never build on them. And there are a few, I would say probably the ones that were affected by the change from the undevelopable to potentially developable were maybe 12 or 13 lots, not a lot. I mean, it's a burden for the person that owns it, I understand that, but it's not a, there
Right,
are
and
not
it's
a lot.
rare case, it's different cases, it's not
Correct, it's a
one-
case by case.
Right, and, right, because I know even people are, like, if properties change hands, family members, people will try to perk a lot again.
Right,
Things-
exactly. If
things
something's been held in a trust for a long time and nothing's been
Exactly.
done with it, then they might try to do
Right.
something with it so they can sell it or build on it,
Exactly, so
whichever.
it's all different cases.
Correct.
Okay. So we should probably try to get back to the.
Let's get back to the
Yes.
classification. yeah.
Eric, did you have a comment?
Just one comment, since this has
Do we need the microphone?
kicked in with me. Oh, it has to be microphone. I'll walk over. I'll just make this is very brief. Well, one thing that might be very valuable to many boards
Grab
and
that chair,
committees
Rick.
in town would actually be to use our GIS system and actually color code our parcel map so that everyone could look at it to see these different classifications. So anybody actually has a better idea. Where are these wood lots? Where are these undevelopable? It would just be pictorially very valuable. And I'm sure it could be done with just a few clicks on the
You might already do that.
I think it is accessible, but I don't know if it's public accessible or just that we use it
What I'm
in-house.
saying is we could make it. It's
I
public
think Matt could probably
it would
make
be
it.
valuable for anybody who's interested in that topic.
Well, you can look up any lot and find out what the code is on it. If
Right.
you're looking at a specific lot on the map, all you have to do is look down on the left-hand side when you're looking at that, and that's all
But my
there.
point is spatially. It would allow
Absolutely.
you to see
Yeah.
everything instantaneously and
Yep.
get a
You could.
visual quantification
Yep.
rather than looking at the database. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's get back to the property tax classification. So any other public comments on this? No? Okay, so is there a motion to close the hearing?
Yes, I move that the Board of the Board of Selectmen close the tax classification
Okay, is
hearing.
there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed nay.
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there a motion for the tax rate?
I move that the Board of Selectmen adopt a unified tax rate for fiscal year 18.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded. Further discussion? So the actual rate will be set at a later date. This is just
The
to-
rate, yes, I probably tomorrow will hit the submit button, either tomorrow or Friday, because I'm not here on Thursday. And the rate is in there, but I have to wait for the last approval before I know whether it's official.
Great, okay. Any further comments?
Not for
Diane?
me.
Thanks for coming. Nice to
Okay.
see you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed nay. Motion carries.
And if we could just, Madam Chair, if the board could sign this, or Diane could leave with a sign. Sure.
Do it.
Get those
Great.
taxes done.
I'm just thinking ahead. Is anybody here for 30 Long Beach? No? Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have, the interview of Sharon Chase as Poet Laureate. Hi, Sharon. Would you want to join us up at the table? Thanks.
Thanks, Diane.
Mitch, would you like to give us a little introduction for the Poet Laureate, just that,
Certainly, Madam Chair. As you've indicated, Sharon Chase is here. She submitted a letter of interest for consideration for the Poet Laureate position.
because Ruth Masson has.
Correct. Her term is expiring, and last year, I believe, Ms. Chase reached out, and we have her information here. So the next step is certainly to come in front of the board now, have a conversation with the board for consideration for that position for a 2-year term.
Great. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for submitting your name. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing? And you don't have to. I think where it is fine.
okay.
Yeah.
Surely. Well, I am a published writer. My whip and stock titles are in the areas of poetry, New Testament, and theological aesthetics. My grandmother, Bessie Story Rogers, in 1905, wrote a book called As It May Be, A Story of the Future. 100 years later, Higginson reissued that book with my introduction and illustrations by my daughter, my husband's daughter too, of course, Amy Elizabeth Chase. I didn't know I was a poet right away. My grandmother foresaw that because she said, when I was a young girl, "You are a poet and you don't know it." Took a long while to find that out, but I did have inklings between my junior and senior year of high school when I went to a church camp, which was a little bit unusual because the emphasis was on writing and art. And I was encouraged then. Things kind of were put on hold during my college years in terms of poetry, although interestingly, the worst teacher I've ever had in my life, he was so bad he went from teaching English to selling encyclopedias, was the one that did encourage the poetry. Things went on hold a little bit, and then they really blossomed when I was a student at Weston Jesuit School of Theology, where I was a Protestant wild card driving Jesuits to the beverages of choice. And Jesuits are very keen on helping students find their life's purpose and the best use of their life, and they encourage that. So I think that's about it. I'm fairly verbally uninhibited, so if you have questions, please feel free to ask.
Did you bring a poem with you for tonight?
I brought my 2 poetry books, yes.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you seriously, for stepping forward and taking this important position in town. I love it at town meeting when we open up with a poem and so forth. It kind of sets the tone. Then it quickly goes downhill.
Yeah, I guess my question is at the town, which of course Paul says town meeting, but what else is involved in the poet laureate in the position? Can you? Maybe somebody can answer that. I don't know.
I don't know what Ruth has done with the job. I know Sue Ellen felt very obligated and encouraged really to do something with the honor of the position, and she has for years now done the poetry reading workshops at the library, and I do go to that.
Great.
I would like to approach the people at the Denmark and say, would you like a reading group, a poetry reading group at the Denmark? And I'm also interested in doing something with children. Erdman's a publisher, independent publisher. They do mostly religious stuff, but they do secular stuff too, and they have some wonderful children's books. Mr. Roger and his Thesaurus, or A River of Words. It's about William Carlos Williams. I haven't read that one. I have read the Mr. Roger and his Thesaurus one, and I'll be thinking about what I might do for children as well as the elderly. Probably the people in the middle, not so much.
We just get town meeting.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're
that's
welcome.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other comments? Or
Yeah.
questions?
So are you going to read us a poem?
I can if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Let's see.
While you get your poem out, why don't we have someone make a motion?
I will move that nominate Sharon Chase as the Poet Laureate for a term to expire on June 30th, 2019.
Second?
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Now we'll let Sharon read her poem.
How about Petite Ode to Pigeon Cove?
Perfect.
Sunken, which we all know is the capital of Rockport. Sunken magical tide pool in the rocks of Pigeon Cove. Starfish, seaweed, shadows cool, cast in beauty's mold. Lady slippers, pussy willows, rich dark loam, in the woods of childhood memory, Mystery as deep as a Buddhist cone, cast in beauty's chemistry. Indigo buntings perch on telephone wires, tool company turn to rust. Joy flows, listening to all birds' choirs, cast in beauty's muster.
Very good. Thank you.
That beats my Roses Are Red, a guy from Nantucket, so I'll leave that alone.
Okay, any further comments? That was so nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
None? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Welcome aboard.
you.
Happy to have you.
Thank you.
That's neat. Do you have a copy of your book that maybe we could keep in the office to take a look at for a week or so?
Sure.
You don't have to leave one with us tonight. Maybe in the next few days you could
Okay.
bring one down just for us to
I'll
take a
bring
peek
one
at.
down.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Cape Ann and beyond the Cut Bridge.
Yeah, no, that's what we got a picture of that. Thank you so much. Nice to see you.
You're welcome and thank you.
Great. Okay, next we have interview of Monica Lawton as a member of the Rights of Way Committee. Hi, Monica. Welcome. Do you want to join us at the table? Or do you want either one is fine.
Would you like a motion?
I would, please.
Okay, I nominate Monica Lawton as a member of the Rights of Way Committee for a term which will expire on June 30th, 2020.
Second?
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. I like to tell people don't be scared by the 2020. It's not really that far away. But welcome. Thanks so much for stepping up. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up here?
Well, I have been living in Rockport for 20 years, but for all of that time commuted into Boston to a position, an executive position at a construction trade association. So I didn't spend much time in Rockport, but recently retired and now have the opportunity to give back and use some of the skills that I developed over the course of 20 years in a professional life. One thing I have done during much of this time is participate in the Sunday morning hikes that were initiated by Ted Tarr, and I am now one of the regular volunteer leaders of those hikes. So have become very familiar with many of the rights of way, have walked the Atlantic Path many times, and I think I now know all the ins and outs of Dogtown, north and south, etc. So I am very familiar with the various rights of way and feel very invested in trying to preserve the public access to both the oceanfront and the woodlands properties, and have a lot of skills that I think can be helpful to the committee. I have been attending their meetings and already behind the scenes helping on a couple of projects.
Great.
I have procurement experience that may come in handy from time to time, as well as other skills that I think could be helpful to the group.
Great. Wow. And I know Tom Kearns is here, who we got an email just saying that Monica had attended. Tom, do you want to make a brief comment? Great.
Tom?
I must say, I have spent a lot of
Not gonna
time at
call him
hearings
Satch.
at the State House in Boston, and this setup is very much nicer.
Tom
In
Kearns.
many ways.
In many, many ways, yes.
Tom Kearns, 116 Granite Street. Chairman of the Rights of Way. We're very excited to have Monica with us and her expertise, and especially we have a grant we're working with the Preservation Committee, and there's a lot of logistics with the grant, and Monica has a lot of experience with that, so we're really fortunate to have her expertise. And she's been coming to the meetings and also to other committee meetings, Planning Board Committee last week, because we have different hotspot issues that pop up from time to time. So we're very enthused about her
It's exciting.
desire to come on board.
Thanks. And thanks for coming tonight, Tom.
Sure.
Nice. Are there questions from the board for
Just a comment, Monica. Thank you so much for stepping forward, and we're really grateful with all of your experience. I saw you in action last week at the planning board, and I can already tell you're going to be a great addition to the committee.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. Other?
I'm good.
questions or comments?
I'm good.
No, I mean.
Just I'll echo the thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody that steps up, people don't realize the time that goes on. They see a meeting, but don't realize the time behind the scenes that you put in and that you contribute to the town. So thank you.
And
If
this
I could just say, Rights of Way Committee, we try to maintain the access, and we try to clear the paths as best as we can, and we volunteer our time for that, and we enjoy doing that and volunteering that time, but just for people who might not be clear about what we actually do.
Yeah, there's obviously the meetings that you have every month and so forth, but there's also a physical component to it, by getting out there and working. And it's so important in Rockport because sometimes generations owned oceanfront property and other places like that, and after a while the lines start to blur over time. So it's the Rights of Way Committee that assures that all this land has access to the public, which is important. So thank you, both of you.
Changes my-
Yeah, and I also think it's interesting to note, as Monica stated, she's lived here for 20 years, but is now retired, so it's time, because I always tell people it's never too late.
Right.
Because some people say to me, "Oh, I've never volunteered," and I'm like, no, it doesn't matter if you moved here yesterday or, have lived here your whole life. Like, we always love for people to step up. So thank you for doing so.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
And then we will vote. Our policy is just to interview someone one meeting and then vote at the next, but you don't have to be here for that. And my guess is that you can continue your hard work already on the Rights of Way Committee. So thank you so much. Nice to see you. Next, we have public comment period. I feel like we've already had some of that, but we will do it again.
We always
Toby?
like public comment.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. In my guise as Miss Manners, I was prepared to offer you good advice on civility and etiquette, but I see you're to be spared. Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. I wrote your board a letter on September 26th. It was stamped at your office on September 27th. I received no reply. You've said repeatedly that you respond to all emails, letters, and telephone, communications. I must say I'm disappointed, offended. I'll read you the letter. I write to you to express my concerns about the public hearing that you have stated that you will hold to gauge public opinion on the proposed Granite Pier extension. If these hearings are to be of any use to either your board or your fellow citizens, you will have to put considerable effort into planning for them. If the town is to make an informed and sensible choice on this project, the citizens will need a lot of additional information beyond what the Army Corps provided at their meeting. It will be up to you to provide this information as well as a recap of the Army Corps presentation with particular regard to the finances. You should provide 1, the number of slips and moorings that the town now has, the number of additional moorings that will be provided at Granite Pier. 2, an estimate of the cost of the gear required for the additional moorings. 3, a statement from the harbor masters on how much additional time they will spend coping with these moorings. 4, if the harbor masters are not offering to do the additional work for free, we work 24/7, in quotes, how much more will they expect to be paid? 5, the Army Corps stated that commercial fishermen would be given preference in the assignment of the new moorings. All of them, or what percent? 6, would the town charge the standard rate for the new moorings, or would they be priced at a premium as at White Wharf? 7, will the town commission a traffic study to assess the current traffic for launching boats? How will you estimate the additional traffic if the project goes forward? 8, will there be assigned parking spaces for the new mooring holders? 9, an estimate of the cost of improving Wharf Road. 10, an estimate of the additional revenue from the new moorings. Easy for me to raise the issues, frame the questions, hard for you to come up with the answers. But all of this information and more will be needed if the public is to have a clear grasp of what the project will provide and what it will cost. Thank you for your patience in reading this, and thank you for your attention to these matters. How wrong I was to thank you, since I got no reply. And even as I was signing the letter, an 11th concern occurred to me, and that related to Steve Ouellette's contention at the Army Corps meeting that the town would be required to provide fueling facilities at Granite Pier. It was not made clear whether that would be required of the town in any case or only if the extension project went forward. But I don't think with something that important we want to be taking one person's word for it. I think we need to get that from the Army Corps with a citation on their regulations, and if that's not possible, we need somebody official on their stationery with a legible signature saying that that's required and when, because that also is a major concern. Are you still planning to conduct these meetings? You promised meetings, plural.
Toby, I apologize. I thought that when they stamped that in, I thought you got a response saying that.
No response.
Okay, so I apologize for that. I will totally take the heat on that one. Yes, we are planning on holding meetings, but you will hear, because it will be in public, any discussion of our planning of those meetings, which is on the list of like meetings and issues that we're tackling this fall. We haven't gotten to it yet, so you have not missed anything. And we will, I have read your letter in full, and we will use your letter and keep it as a guide in terms of issues to make sure that get covered during those meetings. But I think that the questions you bring up are issues that probably most people in town have. And like those will all be part of the big picture. But you haven't missed anything, no meetings scheduled yet. It's on our list. Our thought was just to kind of, we're tackling kind of a whole list of things this fall, and it's on the list.
Thank you very much. Miss Manners forgives you.
Any further- I know, I actually have it on good film that you forgave me for something.
Do we have a comedian laureate in town
I
too?
know.
Can we do that?
Maybe it's Toby. Mr. Tar?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Frederick, 154 Main Street. Just a couple of quick topics. First, I want to congratulate my niece for being poet laureate.
Oh.
I think that is a great choice. Secondly, I'd like to thank Monica for joining the committee. Her takeover and her help on the Sunday morning walks, which I can't do anymore, has been valuable, so valuable. I would also like to remark quickly on one thing that Eric had mentioned, and that is a map of the private versus public lots, especially in the woods. That would help greatly. A lot of people think that the woods are all public land and walkable. They're not. Most of them are privately owned, and some of them more and more are getting no trespassing signs up. So for the Open Space Committee and the Conservation Commission to have a map showing the public what is available for public use and what is private would be invaluable. The main thing I'm here, though, for tonight is the hit that Rockport is taking right now with the closure of Halibut Point State Park for the winter. A couple of years, it used to be open, there was somebody there year-round, and they kept an eye on the park and kept programs going. Now, this year, we've had 100,000 people come to Halibut Point. It's the biggest year ever. And we've had good programs there, but because a few years ago the state took the year-round person out, the water pipes froze, the the visitor center has not been usable since. Senator Tarr has put some money in the budget for repairs, but God knows when that is going to happen. But in the meantime, that was generating, with 100,000 people coming just in the summer, they have to eat somewhere and they have to stay somewhere. It's also on a lot of the foreign tours that they mention Harbor Point, because the sight from the looking over towards the Isle of Shoals and all the shoreline of New Hampshire and Maine, as well as Seabrook, is spectacular. But if we could keep that going year-round, at least have a caretaker there to keep an eye on it, reduce vandalism or just accidental damage, but to keep some programs going, we could have more people during the off-season, fall, winter, spring, who would, again, have to eat somewhere and stay somewhere. So I would ask you to support that through our state reps and anybody else, and for that matter, the Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce, to try to get that park reopened or at least attended and programs continued through the fall and spring, if not the winter. And I think it would be a help to Rockport businesses.
Okay.
So I would ask that you follow through with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? No? Eric?
Two comments. One I'll start with. This is actually fantastic to actually start having filming, and it sounds like it's going to be live.
It sounds
Fantastic.
Like,
I go to
Cool.
I work in so many towns,
Yeah.
and we're so far behind. This is great.
Yeah.
But one of my suggestions: this ought to be at a podium, because people, when they often
No,
speak,
it's our first night. We're figuring that out.
I didn't come in here to bring this up, but I thought about it with the comments that Ted was making. You know, the train station rehabilitation's been going on for quite some time, which is fantastic. They're slowly getting there. It's a very complex underground situation. I think a number of you are aware that a number of times in the past couple of years, I raised issues about public process on the tail end compared to the amount of level of input early on in that process, and it kind of disappeared at the tail end. But one of the things that's still outstanding, and we're all going to be staring at it when they're all done, in particular, is the fact that pretty much everybody ignored the freight house and the crane. Two clearly and identifiable historic structures that I believe legally should have actually had a protection plan and should have had some level of interpretation because they moved tracks and other things. The opportunity never came up to bring this up. But all of a sudden, in the next few months, that train station is going to be done. And we're going to have these two pieces of rotting structures there. I'd like to raise that, and I bring that up here this evening, that's something we want to be covered.
Yeah, just so you know, there's it's too bad you weren't at our last meeting, just because Jeff Propowski was here, who takes care of Evans Field, and in hopefully the next round of CPC funds, there's going to be a request for kind of a historic and a recreational restoration of Evans Field, and the talk is to work restoration of those into it as well.
That's great.
Because they obviously they need effort and restoration, but they also needs money to do it.
Now, just
So
one
the-
thing, where we missed the boat is because that was federally funded. If we had put our foot forward at the time that was going through the process, the Federal Department of Transportation almost certainly would have been forced to have taken care of that.
Oh, I mean,
Absolutely. And I pushed as hard as I could, and I could not get ears on that. But it's going to still hit us. But I will happily work with Jeff to help make that happen in the future.
yeah, so he may at some point actually. I've been talking to him about trying to put a committee together of different people to work on different aspects of that project, because it's a lot. It's the fields. It's also the bleachers, the grandstands, and then also the crane and the freight house. So.
DPW is well aware of this too.
Yeah.
They speak
yeah.
about it regularly at their
Yeah.
meetings. Matter of fact, that's on when we get to the liaison reports and updates. That's tomorrow night. There's a meeting of the DPW, and that'd be a great thing to bring up there if anybody,
Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks. Anyone else for public comment? Yep.
My name's Jane O'Malley, 63 Pigeon Hill Street. This is a little last minute, so I have something on my phone. I had talked to the town administrator, Linda, about how one presents an appeal, and she said I could just present it, and I think I saw something written where if you're want to submit something in writing, it should be done in advance of the meeting. So I don't really have anything.
What is an appeal of what? I'm not.
About the decision by the DPW to approve a sewer on Johnson's Road.
Oh, okay. So that's actually not it. You're more than welcome to make your comment to us.
I will. Yeah.
But we actually don't have any jurisdiction over the DPW, over those issues. I mean, you're more than welcome to make the comment here.
How would
Tomorrow night would be the place, would
but
be at the DPW.
to a DPW commissioners.
The commissioners' meeting is
Okay.
tomorrow night.
and who would oversee the commissioners then? Do you know,
Madam
Mitch?
Chair, if I may, so
Sure.
certainly the commissioners are accountable to the Board of Selectmen, but acting in their water and/or sewer commissioner capacity, I'm
Yeah.
not sure what the route would
We
be
would
for
have
that.
to
I'm not
look up the
familiar
route.
with.
We would have to look it up, but we
yeah.
appoint the commissioners, but
Yeah.
we don't overturn.
Oh, okay. I
make
misunderstood
sense?
Linda because I had asked, what the process was, and she said she'd just bring it up.
Yeah, no, I mean, anyone is
Yeah.
welcome to, anyone in town is welcome to come here with any issue that they want to
Okay.
share.
All
But
right.
we would have to, and I'm happy to look into the process
Okay.
for you. And
All
then
right.
maybe Mitch, would you mind looking into the process?
Absolutely.
But as far as I know, unless I'm mistaken, and I would need to figure that out. I'm not sure what the process is, just because it's never happened.
Okay. Formally, it's sort of a group thing, but I'm just going to read quickly something that
Okay.
a few people we whipped together, and I apologize, it's on my phone. My phone that probably won't work. Oh, sorry. There has been discussion for many years now regarding the desire and need for Rockport to develop a sewer overlay district that helps allocate limited sewage treatment capacity to parts of Rockport that are developable by legal right for being adjacent to an existing municipal sewer line. The Planning Board and the DPW have recently drafted maps and zoning bylaw language that would create such a district, recognizing the limitations in the treatment plant capacity. The DPW was recently requested to extend a sewer line up Johnson's Road, where such an extension was not allowed by right and instead needed explicit DPW approval to proceed. This extension extended outside of the actual draft map for where the proposed sewer district is proposed to be laid out. The vote at the DPW meeting that evening was 2-1 in favor, but only brief discussion, I would say barely any discussion, about the possible and the precedent set by this sewer approval and likely secondary impacts associated with this decision. Since this action in combination with the existing planning board reversing prior planning board decisions that Johnson's Road did not meet suitable width, grade, and construction, I asked if the Board of Selectmen would consider looking deeper into the decision by the DPW and consider the option to reserve their decision, but apparently that's not appropriate. I would also like to add, just bringing it up briefly, that at that meeting, there was a collective gasp when, is it Jim Gardner? He said, I can't approve this because raw sewage is dumped into the ocean during a heavy rain. Our sewer is at capacity. He changed his mind. There really wasn't a whole lot of discussion about anything, and he had every right to change his mind. But it was very like, wow, this is how all of Johnson's will be developed. It's just a thing like that. When this is in place, this planning, this zoning, this, intelligent procedure that's in place to determine what's going on with the sewer. Is it in keeping, was the decision by the planning board and the DPW in keeping with what the people of Rockport want for open space? It just was really a surprise, all of it, I think. I think it was a surprise by the planning board, but just sticking to the point of the DPW, why would you extend, I don't believe it's in the public's best interest, and that should be their first and foremost reason for doing anything, I would think.
Okay.
So, thanks for listening.
Yeah, and Mitch, do you mind just following up on the process by which?
Thank you, and it's
Certainly.
sort of a group thing, and if you want, we can write up something.
Sure, I'll
whatever
connect up.
that is.
I'll speak with the administrator tomorrow to figure out
Doesn't
where
have
it
to
left
happen
off.
tomorrow night, whatever your process is.
I don't know if there is a process, but
Thank you so much.
I'm honest. Thank you very much. Anyone else for public comment? Hearing none? Okay, moving on. Some of this we can fly through. Approval of minutes of September 11th, 2017. Is there a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move that the selectmen approve the minutes of September 11th, 2017.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Minutes of October 3rd, 2017. Is there a motion?
Yes, I move the selectmen approve the minutes of October 3rd, 2017.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, selectmen updates and liaison reports.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Denise, I'll defer. Go ahead. You can lead off if you want.
Sure, okay, attended the planning board hearing last week. There was a long discussion about Thornwood Avenue, which is a right-of-way. And while it right now looks like a footpath, apparently it's actually a road. And the individual who recently bought, not the lot right next to the water, but the lot up, one lot up from that, was in attendance and bought that property with the understanding that she could build a house. And that was a situation where the previous owner had been paying taxes on that lot as a buildable lot. And so the planning board basically said, we have no jurisdiction here. It's a paper road on the maps, according to the town clerk. They've been paying taxes as a buildable lot, so that is going forward. So Thornwood Ave, as it now exists, will soon be very different, and will be become a driveway down to that lot. And then someone was there representing the owner of the property at the very end, who also wants to be able to build there. So
Where's Thornwood?
it's down off of, is that Phillips? Yeah, Phillips. So there are a number of paths, and Thornwood still has a sign.
Yeah.
So you can see the right-of-way. Cedar Ave, that sign has mysteriously disappeared, but will be reappearing soon. And so those are two rights-of-way down to the water, to Atlantic Path, to the Atlantic Path. So that was that meeting. I'm trying to think if there was anything else of significance that came up at that meeting. And also, I'm having a listening session tomorrow evening at the police station, 7 to 8:30, if anyone would like to come and share any concerns or thoughts. Just wanted to mention that.
Great.
Pardon me. I'll say I attended the last Millbrook Meadow committee meeting. That's going to be on our agenda for tonight, so I'll save that because we're going to get into detail on that. Tomorrow night, as I said, is the DPW Commissioners meeting, 7 o'clock at the police station in the community room. So if you have any questions or concerns or issues, obviously you're urged to bring them up then.
I don't think it will be there because I'm going to be there. And
Oh.
this happened at the last.
Oh, so so it must be here then.
I think it's here.
Is it? I stand corrected. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So they're good. I would have went up there again like I did the last time too. So that's good. Attended Harvest Fest, as I know a lot of people did, and it was just absolutely spectacular. What a great event. It was just a lot of fun to see it, and everybody was saying what a good time they had, and really there needs to be more events like that. It just brings community together, and people were responsible. Things were going great. You had people having a beer down there and a pizza, and there was music. It was just fantastic. So love seeing that. We attended attended the chamber meeting last night, was it?
Yeah,
Last night, right?
last night.
My short-term memory.
I know.
Last night, and there were a lot of topics discussed. Went to parking, daytime parking regulations, things like that, and just concerns from the business community were expressed. So that was a great thing. I know the haunted hayride that Charmaine is jumping on here. Could you really use some volunteers for that? It's one of those great treasures of Rockport, like the fireworks and like the Harvest Fest. It's one of those great things. So if you have some time, you have a few hours that you could spare to go up and help out with the concessions, or maybe get some people together and put a skit together, that'd be fantastic as well. I'm sure Charmaine would welcome that. And that's all I have. So I'm good. Thank you.
Great. And just to touch on the chamber meeting last night, so the haunted hayride is the 27th, 28th, Saturday. Right, and then Sunday, the 29th, I have my dates confused. Lisa Glover has put together a whole program of Halloween happenings downtown with trick-or-treating at the shops, and then a pumpkin carving, and she purposefully moved it to Sundays to not compete with the haunted hayride. So it's kind of cool to have a whole weekend of Halloween festivities. And then
Nice story in the paper today.
yes, yes.
Salem
and
has
then,
nothing on us.
don't say that, because next thing you know, there'll be like traffic coming
No,
into
no.
town on but and then after the pumpkin carving, moving to Harvey Park for Halloween movies, which will be really
Nice.
cool. Right. So a lot coming up in the next few weeks, and just, congratulations again to Rockport Exchange on an amazing Harvest Fest weekend. It's like, it literally is just a home run. It gets better and better. I actually thought this year was even better than last year. Just such a cool vibe downtown, family friendly, and seeing people that, I haven't seen in years, and really, really cool.
It's fun.
It was fun. And I talked to the police chief and Lieutenant Schmink, and it seemed like the parking, the restrictions, and the traffic flow, everything seemed to work. And I will just briefly comment on the paving, because I know that the town is paving, from 5 Corners out to Beach Street on Railroad Ave, and that's a town project that's happening during the day. Coincidentally, we found out last week, in the nice way that they do it, the state notified us that they are paving from basically
From High Street
High
to the
Street
town line.
to the town line overnight. So I've seen some let's just say colorful comments on Facebook, like, how dare the town, pave overnight, but it's not a town project, it's a state project. And
It's a
I,
state
for
highway.
one, will be happy to relay to our state representatives, the more notice, the better next time. I think we will be happy to have the paving done in the end, but obviously the more notice, the better on these. But sometimes it's a few days of,
Put in 11 last night. I don't know why they didn't go further when there's nobody on the road.
well, who knows? Who knows, Ted? Who knows?
Because they finished a phase.
They finished a phase, and then I'm sure it's their plan.
Twice last night,
Yeah.
they took the top layer off. That's a whole phase.
Right.
And then going to another phase.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to let people know, so those aren't both town projects. But hopefully, within a couple of weeks, we will have nicer, smoother roads, which will be helpful for the winter. So, I think that's it. Anything else?
No.
Okay, great.
Good.
Moving on to our action list. Appointment of Kenneth Kaiser as a member of the Historic District Commission. And
Yes.
we actually interviewed Ken last week.
We did. I move that the selectmen appoint Kenneth Kaiser as a member of the Historical District Commission for a term to expire on June 30th, 2020.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Acceptance of the resignation of Larry Neal from the Conservation Commission.
Yes, Madam Chair. Reluctantly, I move that the Board of Selectmen accept the resignation of Larry Neal from the Conservation Commission effective immediately.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded, and I know we got an email from Larry. I would like to invite Larry in to one of our upcoming meetings, just to thank him, but also to kind of talk to him. I'd love to talk to him about current projects, and that's going to be a huge loss for the Conservation Commission. I'm hoping that Larry keeps working. I've actually had people say they're going to call him and ask and beg him not to step down, but I think he has personal reasons, and I'm sure that hopefully Larry will continue to contribute.
How many years did he,
9.
9?
It was 9.
Yeah, it's like,
That's a long time.
yeah,
He's still involved with the Open Space and Recreation
Yeah.
Committee.
yep, yeah. So,
That's great.
May I just issue a plea to the the public in general? The Conservation Commission is eagerly looking for a volunteer to fill that slot, which will not be easy, given Larry's enormous contribution. But if you know of anyone who might be willing to serve on the Conservation Commission, it's a very, very important role. So we appreciate your help.
yeah. And I don't want to you know, I don't want to scare people away, but Larry took it as if it were a job, like literally. So, anyway. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The execution of the settlement agreement with Jean McKeon.
Yes, I move that the board approve and sign the settlement agreement with Jean McKeon of 46 Granite Street, number 2, Rockport, Mass, for the sum of $10,000.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Toby, did you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Turn the mic back on.
Toby Arsenio, 95 Granite Street. Jean McKeon hired somebody to cut down the trees. She didn't do it herself. The outfit that she hired was Magnolia Tree, and I do believe they go off scot-free. Is that the case?
Well,
No, we're holding the other person. Okay.
no, yeah.
The responsible party is who it is. They were just the instrument to make it happen.
Well, if you hire a thug to go out and murder somebody, both you and the thug are guilty.
So,
I'm not, suggesting that
Mitch,
at
give a
this
little.
point you can do anything about it, but it ought to be public knowledge who did the evil deed, because they were certainly paid for it and probably got the wood as well. That would have been several cords of wood worth numbers of hundreds of dollars.
Okay.
Are you assuming of this, or do you have knowledge to this, Toby?
I spoke with the town administrator about it.
It's fine. And the town attorneys worked on this. Mitch, do you,
Yeah,
I
no,
know
we
that this
spend
is
a lot
the
of
first
time on
time
this.
that this has been mentioned publicly, so do you want to
Certainly.
just give a summary of the situation for people?
Certainly, Madam Chair. As indicated, Ms. McKeon hired a firm to cut down a tree on town property without permission and after being explicitly told not to.
And the tree was,
Tree was at Granite Pier, and it was an extensive sized tree. It was 24 inches.
and
was a
how
huge
old
oak tree.
The tree was,
Was it 60
Yeah.
years old? And again, done without permission, so destruction of public property and
Yeah.
a public tree. The town was very aggressive in its efforts to curb this. So this is what we hope setting an example for folks that it is completely unacceptable to destroy public property or to do something like this without permission from the town. So this agreement concludes a legal case that the town has been pursuing.
this has been ongoing for several months.
It
The Board
has.
of Selectmen in executive session has been working with town attorneys. And I think that it, in today's day and age, I think that, sometimes things happen, things get cut down. Whether or not someone hired someone, I think what it comes down to is that the town dealt with the property owner. And it's sad, unfortunately, what happened. But part of it is showing people that the town takes it really seriously. And not only was it town property, but it was a tree that was part of the town landscape on public property. And that it's important to be respectful, and that once something is taken down, that's not the end of the story. And I think our hope is that something new can be planted in its place. And this amount of money doesn't even cover the cost of the tree and, all of the legal fees that went into it, but we're hopeful that it will go towards planting something new there. Anyone want to add anything?
No, and when you hire a contractor or someone to work at your home, you tell them what to do.
It's your-
don't-
it's still your
your
property.
your responsibility. So we held the person
Yeah.
accountable, and it wasn't perfect, but it was. Hopefully, the message is going to get out that you can't cut trees down on town property.
So just so people know, it's been a very long, drawn-out settlement process, and it will be good to have it come to a close. I'm glad that people, can hear what happened, so people know the situation. Okay.
Okay.
Any further discussion on this one? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we have the Millbrook Meadow Improvements Chapter 91 license. Why don't we make the motion and then have the discussion? Sure. Great.
I move that the board. I move that the board waive the Selectmen's Policy Number 20-1 for the Chapter 91 license application for Millbrook Meadow Improvements.
Second?
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. I know there's a whole Millbrook Meadow group here. I just want to apologize for all of the confusion. I don't even know if it's, I don't want to backtrack and get into all the, because honestly, And I tried to get through Linda's email, and I was like, honestly, this is just seems to have taken on a life of its own. I think at this point, and Don, I'll let you comment too, because I know you went to their meeting, but we are all so appreciative of all the efforts that have gone in so far, and we just want to be as efficient as possible. And, you know, however best we can move the project forward appropriately and obviously legally, I think is important to do. So I think this motion helps to do that, and I'll let you guys comment. Don, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, the,
Right?
as far as the communication of it, you know, that was a little bit of an issue. However, you know, the way it all transpired, the way it all happened, I think it's owed to the people that we serve to let people know why we're waiving a policy, and that's the reason for tonight. Is because this hearing wasn't necessary, it wasn't required. And we talked about it, and Eric has provided some great insight in that when I went to the meeting the other night and prior to that. So this was just something that was in our packet the last time that we all signed off on that actually we took back and was sending a letter to rescind that request for the Chapter 91 hearing.
Well,
which-
we have this board has a policy about
I understand
hearings,
that, right, but that's what we're doing, is the
Right.
board has a policy, but we're rescinding that policy, and that's just to explain why we're doing what we're doing. So that's really what it comes down to, because what we don't want to do is impede the efforts of what's going on here, and this would have severely impacted the efforts of the Millbrook Meadow Committee, and that is absolutely not the intention. There have been plenty of hearings, there's been plenty of time for public comment, and it was just a feeling that this wasn't necessary, so that's the reason why.
Yeah. So Sam, did you or any of you?
I think Don has stated it, and you're,
Yeah, would you mind?
Sure.
no further comments, it's just, one lesson we take from that is, when in doubt, inform people. If you think maybe they already know about it, maybe they don't. And so DPW or Millbrook Meadow Committee could have been notified that this was in the air. We could have spoken to you and saved you the trouble of going through all this.
Got it.
I think this is a perfect example of not everything isn't black and white. There are gray areas, and we gotta be flexible. And so I'm glad we were able to rectify this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to thank Sam, because his email was very timely in pointing that out. And then as soon as that came to light, that's when really everything kind of jumped into action at that point, and
Yeah.
we made that decision to do that. So.
Yep. Yep. Very briefly, Eric.
Two things. One is I think Don may have used the wrong wording. He actually said to proceed with rescinding the policy. That was,
Right.
I think
Not
you
rescind,
meant
I'm sorry, right.
waiving.
To waiving the
Waive
policy.
the
Right.
policy,
You're
so it doesn't get voted
Thank
that
you
way.
for
The
that
policy
correction.
still
Yeah, you're right.
exists.
Yeah. The
But the other-
motion's been made, so it's
Right.
fine.
The question I had, which I forgot about this policy at some point years ago, which I was probably part of pushing to create, it was almost 20 years ago. Could you refresh our memory with what does the policy differentiate between licenses and permits? This is a Chapter 91 permit, which is usually just associated with dredging type activities. The emphasis 20 years ago, when I know I and Toby and others were pushing to have public input, which is really valuable.
Licenses and permits.
Okay, it's both. Okay, so it says both. But in particular, licenses are those things that are 50, 99-year licenses of public land that is deeded rights to private interests. Those are really important to have those hearings. The licenses, in this case, is on public land, so there's no loss of public use. But the licenses, the permits are typically for a dredging project that is not taking away the public's rights per se.
Right.
So that's just to help defend your waiver. This is
Yeah.
not taking the public's rights away at all.
That's the
Yeah.
way I
We're-
looked at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely. Nope.
And the, I think approximate 2-month delay to the project.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think any time a board policy is suspended, you're owed an explanation as to why, and that was it.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries. So, Mitch, you'll take care of making sure that.
Certainly, Madam Chair, a letter will go out tomorrow to DEP.
One other thing to add, if I may, is we've waived our policy on this. However, the possibility still does exist that a Chapter 91 hearing could still take place if that's requested by the DEP. It seems very unlikely. However, if you see that one was Joe, I think Joe might have had something to add.
Yes, Joe Parisi, Director of Public Works. I did speak with Ivan Morales of DEP, who understood what the situation was, and I explained that most likely there would be a waiver or a letter being sent to them that would request that they not have that public hearing. And I think if they get the letter from you tomorrow, that would indeed be the case.
Great.
Good.
So as long as there's a signed document, Mitch, if you're creating one, I can email that in a PDF form to Ivan Morales, and he would be receiving that in time to cancel the public hearing.
That's ours, but are you also saying that that the DEP would not pursue their 91 hearing as well?
Correct. They're only doing that on the request of the selectmen from the previous letter that they
Perfect.
received. And so
Perfect.
this letter coming to them tomorrow would stop the process as far as I believe the case
Perfect.
to be.
Great.
Good news.
Thanks, Joe.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we voted, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Next we have Long Beach regulations revisions, and I had added what they were in here just because I didn't want people to panic that we were making like huge changes to the Long Beach regulations. This is a 3D rendering requirement in the plan submission. Is there a motion?
I have that motion. Where is it?
L5.
Oh, right in front of me. I'm sorry. I move that the selectmen's, wait a minute. I move that the selection approve the amendment of the Long Beach rules regulations to include
Should
a
be
3D.
selectmen.
Selectmen, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Typo. Include a 3D rendering requirement and two-path plans submission.
Is there a second? I can just comment on this. So when we had the last resident come in to request changes, they mentioned that there used to be a requirement for 3D plans, and then we actually asked them to go do them, and I found them extremely helpful.
Yes.
So I thought it should be returned to that. I don't know how it, I actually don't even know how it got dropped. And then the plan submission is currently the regulations call for 3 copies of the plans, but the office has said that they only need 2. So it will just cut down on the cost a little bit for the people to just submit 2. So these are just minor, one return to what we used to. There's a question?
Chip Tarbo, 24.
Sure. Hi, Chip. Use the magic microphone.
So how long ago was a 3D submission required?
If I may, when Mr. Weaver was here, he's a former selectman, he said that when he was on the board, I don't know, did you serve with him?
I didn't.
He
but
said that there was that requirement back then, so that you're going probably about 10, maybe 12 years
But
back.
I thought it might have even been sooner when he submitted other plans for other properties, because he's an architect. Why, do you have a memory of it, or you?
No, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Having been before you to do plans.
Yeah.
And to get an addition
We
approved.
we can find out, but
I'm just curious as how this came up.
so it came up because what number were they?
4, I believe.
Four came
One
to
with
us.
the deck.
The
No,
one-
they didn't addition
No,
at
The
all.
the
second
roof
floor,
line.
Yeah, the second floor, yeah.
And we couldn't, from what they submitted to us, we couldn't, usually, it's actually the first time I've had trouble visualizing,
Okay.
and Jonathan said, well, you used to require 3D, and so it got me thinking, well, that's crazy, why don't we require 3D again?
And it was much.
And as soon as he submitted the 3D, it was like so simple to, I mean, we also went and saw it, but,
So I think there are two questions I would have. A, we're supposed to, as Long Beach residents, come to you for many things to do with the house,
Yeah.
whether it's, so my question would be, at what point does the cutoff come? Like, if we replace windows or a roof, we're supposed to come to you to ask and request. So is that part of then asking that you'd want 3D renderings for that as well?
oh, for that type of thing?
See, I think you've got to
Oh, to make-
qualify.
Okay,
I think you need to qualify what you're gonna ask for, because
okay,
as
that's
an
what
owner,
you're saying.
some architects you have ability to do 3D renderings, some may not.
Yeah,
So as an owner, not only are you paying for plans, you're now paying for 3D renderings. which could become expensive. It certainly becomes a lot easier in today's world with all the programs that are out there. But I think you also need to think about the parameters
I see what you're
that
saying.
you'd request
right,
that
and
for.
that certain things it's just not necessary.
We could always waive that requirement, couldn't we, depending on the type of.
But when you're submitting, it's either part of the requirement or it isn't.
Well, to
So-
me, the way I feel about it is if something is there, like something like this where there's an
Roof
impact
line.
on views and things like that, then we would need that because that has a bearing on the people around them. If it's a window, that's an aesthetic where it's not really, it's not changing anything to the nature of the building or affecting anybody else. Somebody may not like the window you put in, but you know,
Right.
that's the
So
way
you're
it is.
agreeing. He's just saying we need to
Right.
qualify that in the
Right,
regulations.
I'm not
right.
disagreeing.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
just,
that makes
I'm
sense.
just
Right.
looking at the burden of expense
Yes.
that you're asking somebody to go
I'm
through
trying to
and
define it
submit.
for you.
Yeah, but I think
That's
you-
the reason I
I
stated
think
it.
before you approve it, you need to
That makes
define
sense.
it.
Okay, Mitch.
Madam Chair, if I may, so the section that this is referencing, it's number 3, and it addresses the construction piece. The section that addresses routine maintenance, painting, replacement of roofing, siding, windows, or doors within their existing openings is number 9. So that is its own separate section.
Okay.
So it is not in the same section that
They don't
addresses
have to
3D
get our
renderings.
Approval for that.
Yes, and windows, again, the items I just discussed are carried out without the approval of the selectmen. It's just through a building permit.
That was to do it separate from when you're allowed. That was the timing.
Yeah, it was a timing.
That was
Okay,
a
all right.
timing thing.
Yeah,
not
so
a-
So I guess one of
see
my
your- I see
questions
your
would
point,
be,
yeah.
two would be that if you made it that you possibly could ask for a 3D rendering if necessary,
Yeah.
that may make more sense than
Regulation.
requiring it from a cost standpoint.
Okay.
Right.
It's just a thought. You know, that if you can't understand visually from the plans presented just how it's gonna look or interact with neighbors or whatever.
Okay.
You could then ask them to come back with a 3D rendering.
I think the
Okay.
last thing anybody wants to do is put an undue monetary burden on anybody that they want to do. That's not the
Yeah.
intent. The
And
intent is just to
certainly I
clarify.
get,
Right.
some people are visual on plans and some people aren't.
Why don't I just ask Paul or
So
Linda?
it just was a question.
No, that makes, I'm glad you brought it up. Why don't we, my suggestion would be to not vote on this tonight, and I can ask Paul, the building inspector, how, if he thinks we should qualify, if he thinks it should be written in here differently, or, but I totally see your point. We just want to make sure that we're not requiring like an exorbitant cost.
The other thing I think would be helpful
Modify
is,
the language on this?
to understand the language that you're
Right.
requesting.
Right.
Before you vote on it
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, I just want to make sure.
But if there was an amendment to the language that was there, just so we can get, in other words, if it read proposed renovations or construction, and one, if requested by the Board of Selectmen, three-dimensional rendering of the proposed renovations, would that cover it?
Well, that adds time. He's just saying that if they have to submit it, like they want to submit it at first. Do you know what I mean? So that they don't
Okay.
come to us and then, I think that a quick discussion with Paul could kind of take care of it because,
I agree.
And as you say, Madam Chair, this was the first time
right.
that you haven't been able to visualize it.
Right, but it could be because all the plans I've looked at are 3D plans and I just didn't realize it. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I know mine weren't.
Okay, okay, so
This
yeah.
one, we really needed it. We really needed it.
Yeah,
for
we
this
did really
Yeah.
need it.
one.
So I certainly think that if
Okay.
you really need it, then you could request it,
Yeah,
which makes sense. But if you don't really need it, why have somebody go through the process?
right, I agree, but I also don't want to make them go through the process and then say now you need to, you know what I mean? Because I know it's a short window when you
Yeah.
can actually.
Or the
do
other way
work.
to do is we often find 3D renderings very helpful.
Yeah,
Maybe you'd like to submit them with, but it's always tough when you make it a regulation or don't make it a regulation.
would people be all right with just moving this to next week and I'll talk to
Sure.
Paul about it? And just get his,
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I don't think we have a whole line of
Applicants right now.
applicants waiting.
Not
I
yet,
think
but there have been
that's
some
helpful.
sales in the last month or so.
Yeah, so I think we
And
want to
the
get on it.
building season just came available. So you're
Yeah.
gonna have some, I'm sure.
No, definitely.
As you do every winter.
Okay, yeah, so we'll put it back on. We meet again next week, so we'll put it on for next week and I'll talk to
Busy
Paul.
month, huh?
Busy month. But thanks, that's a
Okay.
good point.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that okay with
Good
everybody?
point, yeah.
Okay. Conservation Commission release of funds, Selectman Murphy?
Yes, I move that the board approve the Conservation Commission's request to withdraw up to $500 from the Conservation Fund to pay for supply items for the Coastal Sweep Beach Cleanup event.
Motion has been made and seconded. Further discussion? Nope. Sounds good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. 30 Long Beach lease transfer to George Capital Investments LLC.
Yes, Madam Chair, I move the Board of Selectmen approve and sign a lease for 30 Long Beach with George Capital Investments LLC. Christopher M. George, manager of 12 Shipley Court, Middleton, Mass, to reflect the transfer of ownership.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we have the 30 Long Beach notice of lease for George Capital Investments LLC.
I move that the Board of Selectmen approve and sign a notice of lease for 30 Long Beach with George Capital Investments LLC, Christopher M. George, manager of 12 Shipley Court, Middleton, Mass.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made. You two aren't quick enough tonight. Motion has been made and
Been a while.
seconded. Any further discussion?
No.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, wow. Is that it? Except discussion? Great. Okay, so next we have our daytime parking regulations discussion.
Oh, Don's got one. This is just in, breaking news.
Uh-oh, hot off the press. This is not fake news. This is the real thing. Here we go. Selectman Campbell signed the payroll warrant number 15, totaling $551,020.31, and expense warrant number 15, totaling $179,248.64 on October 11th, 2017.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good save, Mitch.
Okay, so, I met with the police chief onto daytime parking regulations. I met with the chief, did you guys sign this?
No.
Briefly, right before we came here, because I know, he's been working hard on trying to find some kind of answer to the daytime parking issues. And then as we were coming in here tonight, we got a letter signed by several merchants.
22? Or 22 signatures.
22 signatures. And why don't I just read this out loud so we can share it. It says, it's dated yesterday. As you have heard from many of the merchants, we've experienced a daytime parking problem in Rockport when the meters or kiosks are removed. The issue is that cars park all day in front of the shops, making it impossible for customers to find spots. Last year we found this was exacerbated when the overnight winter parking ban was lifted. With no limits to parking, either day or night, cars were left unmoved for days and even weeks at a time. In the past years, the meters, now kiosks, were removed in mid-November. Based on conversations with the Overnight Parking Committee, the Parking and Traffic Committee, and the Board of Selectmen, the various concerned parties believe the best solution is to leave the meters and kiosks active and enforced until January 2nd. This will allow residents to park overnight while keeping spaces available during the day for shoppers, particularly during the important holiday shopping season. We, the undersigned, approve of this proposal and urge the Board of Selectmen to make this change. And this is signed by, I think, 20-something merchants. So this is one proposal. And then we also got a memo from the Traffic and Parking Committee.
Yep.
That says the committee voted, after thoughtful consideration with the guiding principle of taking a measured approach and not making major changes to the current system and regulations, the committee voted 4-0 to recommend the extension of the operation of the 10 parking kiosks until January 2nd, 2018. Extending the pay for parking kiosk operations for November and December will help deter individuals from parking for long periods of time in areas serviced by the kiosks. This will aid in providing businesses the parking space turnover they are seeking. It was made clear to all in attendance that the police department would require the community's assistance in identifying those in violation of the parking kiosks and making notification to the department so the matter can be addressed. oh, here we go. All of the parking, this is their proposal. All of the current parking kiosks will remain operational and service the areas of Back Beach, Front Beach, Main Street, from Beach Street to Dock Square, and School Street for the months of November and December, should the Board of Selectmen so decide. The parking meters in other areas of downtown will be removed at the beginning of December, consistent with previous years, and parking in those areas will be free of charge.
I didn't get that letter.
No, I don't have it either.
Oh,
didn't
maybe
get
I
it.
took yours.
And this is the first I'm hearing about this.
Yeah. So,
So
good
basically, the
compromise.
chief is the Traffic and Parking Committee is recommending kind of a compromise of leaving the kiosks going until January 2nd, but removing the meters
Right.
so that they can still put the Christmas trees up. And the chief says it's basically November and December so that they can really watch what happens in that area and see. And I also met with him just before this meeting, and we mentioned discussing, looking into when the T Wharf overnight parking opens, because it may be that opening that sooner, as was mentioned to us last night at the chamber meeting, could help that area as well. So it would kind of be a trial for this year to see what happens.
right.
So we would still have some free holiday parking, which I know is important to me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Now people think.
Yeah. No. I thank you and your committee for all your hard work
Most of them are here tonight.
tonight, all of you. This is. I think we're going to be moving in the right direction. I did bristle when it was mentioned that free parking during the holiday season would be eliminated, because that's been going on since probably about 1985. Although the Chamber of Commerce and some other people said that it really wasn't that big of an issue, but I think this is, as Mina correctly pointed out, I think this is a good compromise to have the kiosks working, and the town will obviously get money up for that for the additional 2 months, and then get rid of the parking meters, so there will be free parking for people. But I also don't think that people aren't going to go to John Tar's because they have to put $1 in to buy a sweater, to use your quote, because they have to pay, because it's not free. So, but I think this is a very good compromise, and I think this will work. And as we say often here at this table, nothing is forever.
That's right.
If this doesn't work, we can change it and so forth. But I think it's excellent forward motion thinking, and so I support it.
So, just so we know, we have to have any changes to the parking have to have a public hearing.
No.
But what we could do is do a public hearing on this next week, and also we could put this and the winter parking ban on the action item, on the action list as well.
We need to,
So.
because we really, public outreach on this is going to be critical, and the more time we have for this, the better off it's going to be.
Can we do it at the same meeting?
And
Yeah, we could do it at the same
And the
meeting.
easier it's going to be to implement and phase this in.
Yeah.
So, but the only change I would suggest, and this is, thank you very much,
Oh, I know, one other thing,
is the
sorry.
January 2nd, and unless any of the members of the committee, if I've missed anything, or anybody's missed, please speak up. So that's the only change I would make, which is fine. I
To do
really
what?
wouldn't worry. To extend it, they said till for the months of November and December, it needs to go to January 2nd is what the business owners were asking for.
I also talked to the chief about, which we're gonna look into this week, about doing at the meters down there, like where they remove the meters, doing a 4-hour limit, and they would try to, we're gonna
Wouldn't
talk
that
about
get
that this
confusing?
week.
I mean, you have 4 hours and then you have meeting, I mean, it seems to me
That might be, so we're gonna just think about that this week, but we could discuss next week as well.
That would be. We can bring that up in the public hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, of course, yeah. So,
Sarah.
I don't know. Is there a question? Sure.
Stephen Law, Dave Couvert Fine Art, 73 Main Street, 52 Granite Street, Pigeon Cove.
The North
Rockport.
Village.
Yeah, North Village. I only had a question about how it was read, about the enforcement of it. It's a little confusing to me because it seems that you're putting the burden on the enforcement onto the merchants. And so that's what I heard
Okay,
in
how
the
did-
reading
yeah.
of it.
Okay, how would that be? Because that's definitely not what I meant.
No, it just said this will, just call the police. you know.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm only suggesting in this, when you're doing your consideration for the public hearing, that some sort of either a protocol or process or be sort of specified for merchants so they know exactly what to do.
You mean if you see someone violating the,
Yeah,
I
so-
will, and this is actually very important to the police chief. If anyone sees anyone violating anything, they're to call the police. Because I know last year people were calling me, but no one called the police.
Well,
And the
see,
chief's
that's-
like, them, they have no record. So if anything, call the police.
That makes so perfect sense, but
Yeah.
just make sure it's explicitly said in terms of the protocol.
sure.
So that we can all sort of be in agreement about it as we
we
move forward.
Part of what we're going to do is send out a letter to everybody. We're trying to get it with the tax bills if we can, and in that letter we could broach that subject and let people know what would be protocol for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think before, the only rule that the police had was that you couldn't park in the same spot for over 72 hours. So now, there's an enforcement that the police can bring based on,
Yeah.
if this is voted in.
Yeah, and I know this is, while I'm speaking, I'll just go ahead and say this. I really have a little reservation about being in the position of reporting on a neighbor. It's just a little unsettling to me. Not much is worth it to be in that position, quite frankly.
And the police chief has committed to the police doing regular, he says that they can enforce the kiosks like regular. That's reasonable, and they're planning on doing that.
That's wonderful to
So I'm
hear.
hoping that, people, because obviously we don't want to put people in an awkward position of having to look on the streets,
not,
and
yeah.
that we'll do regular kiosk enforcement.
And just so, because I've heard it mentioned tonight, this whole consideration about the holiday season, about the benevolence of it, and the general sense that we want to be hospitable and giving. I know that in our gallery, we're going to post that we would discount anything that someone comes into our shop for if they get a parking ticket. I'll pay for their parking ticket because it has nothing to do with actually the ticket. It has everything to do with accessibility to parking. And I think at least the merchants on our end of town hope to continue to make that hospitality and that sense of welcome to anybody that happens to come to Rockport
Great,
active, because it's a part of what we care about too.
great.
Thanks.
Thank you, thanks for
Thank
speaking.
you.
So we'll put it on next week's, we'll do the public hearing, which we are required to do, and then we'll also have both on our action list.
And I think just to that point, that we're meeting consecutive weeks to do that.
Right,
So
we
that's,
meet- yeah,
so
we
it's,
have a
if
meeting.
it sounds odd that we're meeting next week, it's not. We just scheduled back-to-back meetings.
We have a meeting next week, so we don't meet on Halloween.
Boo.
Right, so it's working out. Okay. Anything, any other business or announcements?
Nope.
Mitch, do you have anything? Hearing none?
That's it.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved?
So moved. Second, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
nay. Motion carries. Thanks for coming.